Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with Rachel Balkovec, who is a minor league hitting instructor in the New York Yankees organization. Rachel, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. So before we started recording, we talked a little bit. I told you I'm a huge advocate of females in sports, and especially those who are in male-dominated sports, such as baseball. Obviously, I'd mentioned that my mom had worked in a lot of male-dominated fields. I saw her struggles in the 1980s of, being on a construction site and trying to explain to her male counterparts that she really did know how to read a blueprint and some stuff like that. So, I guess first of all, what really, I know you played softball in college, but what was it that made you want to get involved in professional baseball?
Yeah, I don't tell this story very often, but I'll tell it now because it's just so far in the past. So I played softball in college, obviously, and I knew that I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach, and so I went on to do a graduate assistantship at LSU. But meanwhile, in my personal life, I had, as an undergrad student and softball player, I was dating a baseball player. And then he got drafted and started playing for the Dodgers in their minor league system. And I had no idea about minor league baseball, none. And he was going through his journey as I was going through starting my career as a strength coach. And I was at LSU seeing extremely high level baseball and softball, extremely high level, just culture and how that goes, and high level strength and conditioning, nutrition, all these things. And meanwhile, my boyfriend at the time was going through the minor leagues, and horrible bus rides, horrible clubhouses, horrible nutrition, lifting at the YMCA. And I just thought, I really am interested by this. I really think there's a lot of room for growth, and that hopefully I can be a part of changing that and improving it and bringing some of the college model essentially to the way that they look at player development and performance. And so I was really fascinated by that. I was very fascinated by Latin America. I just had no idea about the minor league system and how extensive it is and how Latin America plays such a big role. So I became super fascinated by the minor leagues and the business aspect of just players moving up and down and how they're signed and where they come from and all of the politics. So I just became very fascinated by the whole, Titanic that professional baseball is. And I decided I wanted to get into it. And that was truthfully from an experience with an ex-boyfriend, which is funny. Nice guy. I mean, we're obviously not together anymore, but he definitely, I think kicked me down the rabbit hole of what's going on over here that we can improve,
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned, so your first involvement in Major League Baseball was as a strength and conditioning coach.
Mm-hmm.
And what I understand, with the Latin American players, you actually had to learn Spanish so you could communicate to them better. How old were you when you took on the task of learning a second language?
I was 24, going on 25, when I got my first internship for the Cardinals in 2012. And I just immediately knew that if I was going to reach those players, that was the only way. There was no, so I had the high school Spanish, and I just was I showed up and I hit a brick wall with communicating with them. And definitely there are a unique group of guys who are coming from extremely different background than, say, our college players that just stepped off of Vanderbilt's campus, So if you want to reach them, it's vital, in my opinion, obviously, to learn and kind of go to them as they're learning English. But I've got 2 college degrees, or now 3. It's way easier for me to pick up a new language than it is for them to pick up English as they're also transitioning. So, I just knew that it was imperative for me to learn that. And obviously that then bolstered my resume and made me a better candidate for future jobs.
Yeah, that's huge. The organization that I was involved with, we were heavily, 72% of our players were Spanish, Latin American players. And, we'd get 10, 11-year-old kids who just came over here from Dominican or Puerto Rico. And, to see how quickly they would learn English at a young age was just astonishing to me. And I would always tell them, and it's one of my regrets, is to not really learn Spanish. And now at 51 years old, I've kind of, I don't know, I guess I've given up on it, but I probably shouldn't. We can do whatever we want, but
Mhm.
at least for now, I've given up on learning a second language. But I would tell these kids all the time, I'm like, man, being bilingual, you know, never underestimate the power that
Neither.
is. Again, to see these kids, how quick they learned it at a young age, literally come in here and not know the language at all to start and then pick up on it so quickly was real impressive to me. So, a lot of the women athletes I talk to, they talk about how when they were growing up, they never really had a female role model to look at, where um, you know, their sports mentors, so to speak, were always males, whether it was Michael Jordan or Nomar Garcia Parra or whoever it is. Why do you think it's so important today for young girls to see someone who looks like themselves to inspire them to, get out into these roles?
I was fortunate that I'm just young enough, I think, that I could watch college softball on TV. And it was funny. So I recently had the pleasure of being interviewed by Jessica Mendoza, who, for the listeners that aren't listening, I'm pretty sure she's a two-time Olympian gold medalist softball player, a hero of mine growing up. And she interviewed me on ESPN, which was like trippy, right? But the first question she asked me was, she goes, she was like, so who was your favorite team growing up, or who's your favorite player? Who did you watch the most? And I was like, you. Like, I was like, you. And she's like, oh, she's like, wow, it's so funny. I totally took that for granted, because when she was growing up, just 10 years, she's about 10 years older than me, just 10 years before, there was no softball on TV. And she said the first time she remembers watching softball on TV was in college. She was watching the Olympics. And so me as a young, I would say I understood college softball and like understood some of the key players by the time I was like 12 or 13. So I could actually truly have role models. I remember Venus and Serena Williams. I remember Brandy Chastain from the World Soccer Cup, Women's Worlds. And I had a couple key ideas in my head of a strong woman, of an athletic woman, of a female, and Kat Osterman, who now I've connected with later in life. It was just also trippy. Kat Osterman is a famous softball player who's on This Is Us, and she was at Texas playing, and I wanted to go to Texas. I obsessed over Texas softball, and so I had those opportunities, and it was vital, man. The original question was how important that is. That's vital, I think, to have a visible idea of like, oh, I can play sports at a higher level, which then that opened up the door for me to coach and be a strength coach, which then that has opened the door for me to be a coach. And like, it all started with me having an opportunity to play high level sports, to be honest with you, and just believing that I could, just knowing that that was an opportunity for me. So watching those women on TV was huge. And that's why it's such a, like, you're going to ask, I'll save it for the last question, but that's why it's so heavy on my heart to be visible and available for young women, interviews like this, anything really, to just become totally available and visible for young women to see. I think that's vital. It was definitely important for me, and I obviously hold the belief that that's important for me to do now for other people.
So on the flip side of that, um, why do you think it's important for young boys to see women in roles of baseball coaches? I mean, growing up for me, to have a man coach the softball team was not uncommon. To have a man coach the girls basketball team was not uncommon. To have a man coach the girls volleyball team was not uncommon. But all of a sudden, you have a female coaching the boys baseball team, and everybody's like, whoa, what's going on? So why do you think it's important for people to see, yourself and Alyssa and Tina out there coaching professional baseball players?
Yeah. Right. Which is tough, because it's like, especially young boys, like young girls think it's cool, that young girls want my autograph. Young boys, they don't think it's cool. They're just like, it's weird, but just, I hope someday, the lasting residual effect, it's just that it makes it normal for them to see that, even though they might be confused. They're just like, oh yeah, that one chick that worked for the Yankees, I remember that a long time ago. Like, it's not as weird. It's just funny how the dynamic, like I'll go talk to a college high or high school softball team, and they think it's really cool and they want my autograph, and it's like, you know, I'm a celebrity of some kind. And I go to a high school baseball team and they're like, okay, like, cool, whatever, you know. And I hope and I think that it's important just for them to become more normal. We're just at the stage where they don't think it's weird. Like, that's the best thing we could do, is that move the needle a little bit. Not that they have this amazing respect and they think it's amazing and all this stuff. That's not what they're thinking at age, you know, 10 to 20. But maybe they look back, or you know what, when they have a daughter, that's when it really hits them and they go, I mean, because it's like the players are like, whatever, this is weird, you know, or they're being great with me, but I'm just saying they might think in their head, high school, younger, they're like, yeah, whatever. And then the dads with the daughters, I get more dads with daughters reaching out than I do young women that are like, oh my God, you know, my daughter has an example. And that's when it becomes really important to them. So if they're really young, hopefully when they start having daughters, they start to go, oh yeah, I remember that woman, and showing their daughters pictures and whatever. I mean, I hope that's when it hits, but I do think it's important, but I won't reap the benefits of that. None of us will for decades.
Yeah, I think that is true. Becoming a father of a daughter definitely changes your perspective without a doubt. I've got 3 daughters and I've got 4 granddaughters, and you know, I'm always, you know, for me to then think that someone would tell them that they can't do something simply because of their gender, I'm like, no, that's not happening.
Yeah. You're like, it's my daughter, you know. But then before you had daughters, you might have been like, yeah, what's the big deal? Like, you know, now you're like, no, I'm a sister of 2 other sisters. So my parents had 3 girls, and my dad did not take it easy on us. We were mowing the lawn, raking the leaves, shoveling the snow. We did yard work. He taught us the cars, and he never told us no because you're a girl, like, never, you know. And I give him all the credit. And now people are like, you know, you can relate to this, and hopefully somebody listening to the podcast can too. People will say, oh, 3 daughters, that must be really tough. And he's like, Google my daughter and then tell me. He's like, my daughters are awesome. You know, he takes pride in that he raises to be capable and strong women. And of course my mom is great too, but like my dad he played a huge role probably in how I viewed my male authority figures as supporting me instead of I'm less than them.
Yeah. And, you know, for me, I know I saw something on social media a while back. Somebody posting about, you know, what players' jerseys do you wear that have the names of the players on your back? And, you know, it was funny because I got to thinking, I'm like, I only have 2 jerseys that have a player's name on the back, and one of them is Jenny Finch and the other is Allie Krieger. So it's like the two players that I have names on my back are female players, one a soccer player, one a softball player. So it's, you know, it's kind of funny. And, you know, I do think that, you know, becoming a father and you know, a grandfather is definitely a game changer. So it doesn't surprise me that you have a lot of dads reaching out to you and how important it is, the work that you're doing. I know when you were in the hiring process, there was a time where you changed your resume, instead of having Rachel on it to have, you know, Ray. Like, obviously you overcame all this, but how frustrating was it during that process to know that people would look at your resume and see the name Rachel and just discard it?
At the time, it was actually a relief. Just to be clear, that was actually when I was first getting into the game in 2013. I had done an internship. Well, I'd done 6 internships, all with baseball. I had moved to the Dominican Republic. I had LSU, Arizona. I mean, I had a great resume for a young coach, and I had some pretty blatant discrimination leading up to the 2013 season, and I could not get a job. So I sat out a year and waitressed, worked at Lululemon. I did an internship again for Arizona State, a second internship for Arizona State. I ended up getting an internship for the Chicago White Sox to work with their fall league team, which basically meant I was like literally babysitting the weight room and doing nothing. But I was like, anything, I will take anything. They paid me $30 a day to drive 45 minutes across town. So I was in a pretty rough like spot again, and coming up to the next season. And my sister said, well, why don't you change your name on your resume to see if you get at least an interview, and then you can talk to these people and they'll know that you're competent. Like, and I changed my name and I got email responses like immediately. I mean, I got like, it was like 24 hours and I was like, whoa, like I've never had this much response to my resume. And it was all still, I wasn't naive because I had been really very blatantly discriminated against the year before, like told, you're not going to get the job because you're a woman. And I wasn't naive, but like it even solidified the fact that there was a lot of gender discrimination going on, because as soon as I changed my name, I got these immediate responses. And then I got a phone call from a guy ended up very awkwardly when he found out that I was a woman, and I never heard from him again. And so it was a very short-lived alter ego, Ray. But it taught me, it just showed me, if anything, it's funny, it wasn't frustrating. It actually gave me a little hope, because I was like, okay, my resume is good. I'm doing the right things. My work is paying off kind of, because I am building the right resume. It's just, I just need one person to give me that opportunity. So it was frustrating, but actually it was like, at least they're responding to me. I was like, yes, like it's exciting. I was getting emails back from, major league teams. And I was like, okay, my resume is good. All of this work isn't in vain. It just is going to take the right person to make the move. And the Cardinals ended up hiring me back full-time in 2014. And, all the credit to them. I look back and the further that I get removed from that moment of being hired by them, the more I realize how big of a deal it was for them and how many people had to weigh in on that decision at the time. Nowadays, it's really, it's cool to hire a woman. I feel like it's getting really popular to hire a woman now in some ways. At the time, there were literally almost zero women in player development. There were a couple of athletic trainers at the time. And this was a strength coach, which is a more authoritative, like kind of hands-on coaching position, as opposed to an athletic trainer who's treating injuries. And it's a more there are more women athletic trainers than there are men. So it's a more female-dominated industry in the first place. So there were like a couple of athletic trainers out there and me. And so the fact that they hired me, and not only hired me, but they hired me into a coordinator role. So I went from, I couldn't even get an internship, to I was overseeing 250 minor league players, traveling all over the country, assisting our major league strength coach with everything that he needed, a part of every single facet of development for those guys. So yeah, I mean, at the time, changing my name on my resume was simply eye-opening. It gave me a little bit of hope, a glimmer of hope, because I was like, okay, well, at least I know I'm doing the right things. It's just going to take, ended up being the Cardinals to take the leap and hire me.
That's cool. And we talked a little bit about this before, where, hopefully someday this isn't so much of a big deal. But throughout that process, did it ever really click to you that, I am a trailblazer, I'm breaking glass ceilings, or is it just, look, I just want to get a job and work in a game that I love?
Yeah, 80% that one at the time, because at the beginning of your career, you're just trying to survive and like do a good job. It's just like, but pretty quickly before I got hired, even, I just remember thinking like, shit, like this is true, blatant gender discrimination. I was so naive that was going on. And even during that year that I sat out and was just waitressing and stuff, I got 8 different colleges that approached me for collegiate strength and conditioning jobs, all women's sports, all of them. And then I would say, can I assist with baseball? Can I get men's? And they were like, no, it's not really the job. And I was like, I'm starting out my career. This is what I have to look forward to. I'm held out of men's sports, which by the way is a much better career, much more lucrative. The ceiling is much higher. So I just was like, I already didn't like it. And I kind of felt this a little bit of a duty to be like, no, I'm not quitting on this. If somebody's going to do it, I'm the right person to do it. I know I'm more than qualified. I have all of this experience in baseball. I played softball in college. I know I'm more than qualified to do the job. So I kind of felt this little bit of a duty to keep going, as I figured that other females had applied and, not heard back. And then they were like, oh, I'll just go do this, college job. I just felt responsible in some ways because I knew that I could do a really good job. So, I mean, that was not on my mind. Like you said early on, I just was like, I just need a job. Pretty quickly after I was hired full time, about a year in, when I could come up for air a little bit, I started understanding that I also felt another responsibility then to, like, you know, empower people, help people up, be a visible idea. I started a website, and that was very not, people did not like that either. And thought that I was just, I don't know, trying to promote myself, but it's like, no, this is really important. It's very important that I'm not just like in the shadows and no women know about me. It's important that they know about it.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that's actually a perfect segue. I wasn't sure if I was going to bring this up, but now it's kind of a perfect segue. I want to go back a couple years to a post that you put on social media. I'll read it here from back in 2017. You said, I want to tell everyone you're being lied to. The truth is, you don't have to conform. You don't have to follow the rules. You don't have to be nice. You don't have to fit in. You don't have to lay low, put your head down, stay quiet, and blend in. And you don't have to apologize for not doing those things. The truth is that the only task in which you should concern yourself is to choose your circle carefully so you never have to hear those lies. So again, that's from 2017. And
Oh God.
It's a pretty powerful statement. And I think it goes to what you were saying, that, now recognizing that it's more than just a job, to build a website, to be an influence is important. Kind of what were you thinking back then in 2017 when you posted that?
God, what do you have the date up? What, 2017? What was I doing?
May 28th of 2017.
I mean, I just like I was starting my transition of like knowing that what was the next step for me was being a hitting coach, and not just that. This is, I have a lot to learn here, so I'm not worried about going anywhere else, for now. But I know that this is also a step for me for where I really want to be, which is probably in the front office at some point. And I just was coming to the realization, I was like, at some point in your career, you go, okay, I'm just going to put my head down and lay low. And then I'm just like, I think probably that was at a time where I was like, nope. And then I just was, I think I was making the decision to leave baseball, go back to school, transition to hitting, try to come back as a hitting coach. And that was a really big mountain, like to be staring up. So sometimes, a lot of times what I put on social media is for me. It's just like thoughts that I'm having about myself, that I also want to share with everybody else. And so that I have to remind myself. And then I'm like, okay, this is a good thought that I've had to tell myself that I want to put out to the world. So it's one of those things where when I made the decision, it's like, I couldn't unsee it. Like I was leaving strength and conditioning behind and moving on. And I just was like, I can't go back. Like once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I think I was at the bottom of the mountain. Now I feel like I'm at the bottom of another mountain, but like just making the transition, making a decision to quit, applying for schools, visiting Amsterdam, going back, moving to Amsterdam, selling my car, giving away all of my belongings and moving to Amsterdam with 3 suitcases when I had a job with the Houston Astros. Like making all of those decisions were very difficult. And yeah, I think I just was going through a shedding of my skin.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think it's real important for us to be able to show our vulnerabilities at times. I know a lot of times, I think what you just said there is so true, where, we'll throw something out there and it's as much for us as it is for everyone else, because, let's face it, we're all great at giving each other advice, but not necessarily taking our own advice. So I think when you post it and you put it out there and you got to go back and look at it, it's pretty important to be able to say, yeah, you know what, I did say that, and we need to make a difference here. So, now that you're with the Yankees, obviously COVID has thrown a wrench into everyone's baseball career. You started a little GoFundMe campaign, which I think is very cool. Tell me a little bit about that and why you wanted to do that.
It's like you can't do everything, but you just do what you can. and I have a small social media following. I do podcasts, I do interviews, and it's like I decided basically that I was going to donate $5 of my own money for every single day that baseball was on break, which opening day is today. So I'll stop doing that. But also for every podcast or interview that I did, I asked for a minimum of $10 donation. And I think it's up to $6,000 now ish. And I just wanted to like use what I have to create, to do good. And so I started that GoFundMe, not having any idea where it would go, and it's at 6,000. To be honest with you, I think I'm just going to keep it going because it's been such a pleasure to see people's reaction to it. Because it just, when you see someone doing something that is philanthropic or whatever, it inspires the thought of like, what can I do? So it's been really cool to see other people also do similar things and go, oh, yeah, I'm going to actually give 10% of my lessons that I'm giving. I'm going to give that to charity and give that to COVID relief. That's needed around the country. And I don't know, my entire life really, like from a 100,000-foot view, has nothing to do with baseball. It's just, how can I make the biggest impact on this planet before I leave it? And that's what I try to do in my day. You're going to ask me again, you're going to ask me the question at the end, but we got here already. But it's like, it's really what I think about more than I think about hitting a white ball. I think about what I'm doing in the world, what I'm doing in sports, what I'm doing for women, just in general, I think about that stuff a lot. And so that just created the idea of how can I do good? And that was what I came to.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And when I saw that as I was filling out the form to do this podcast, I was all in on it and, made a donation. And my wife was like, what's this out of our bank account? And I explained to her, I said, oh, cool. Okay. But I do think that's so important where, what we're doing for others is so, important. I mean, like I said, I'd been in youth sports for 30 years, but it never really was about the sport. It's about the connections and being able to, make these kids' lives better. And, as you see them succeed and, kids, I mean, part of a big portion of our RV journey is going to be, me reconnecting with, players that I've coached that are literally scattered across the United States. So, for someone as young as you to really grasp that and, kind of see that big picture that it's, much more than a game, I think is so important. And, while talking about that, about it being, more than a game, you talked a little bit about how you and Kat had reconnected through, the This Is Us softball team. Tell me a little bit about how that came about and, why you feel, what they were trying to do was so important.
I just appreciate people who stick their neck out, for the right thing or just for a cause. And I definitely do that personally and make personal sacrifices and have people get upset with me because of controversial things that I decide to do or not to do. And I just love seeing people use their platform to do those things. And there's a debate of like, I just have thought a lot about that. Why do athletes do this? So explaining a bit just for the listeners of what that is in case you don't know. Basically the softball team, the Scrapyard Dogs, is a professional softball team. And they were playing their first game back after COVID, which was I believe the first professional game in the United States of America played after COVID hit. So, like monumental moment, they're back to playing sport. It's kind of a, good, hopefully a happy moment for them. Well, they get in after the game and they had all these messages and blown up on Twitter and blown up on everything that the Scrapyard Dogs account had put out a tweet about them all standing for the anthem. So it was a picture of everyone standing for the anthem, and they tweeted at Trump and said, Trump, look at all of our players respecting the flag, kind of like, and anyone who knows anything about softball, you're probably going to have a very liberal team there, and one black player and people that have played all over the world internationally, and very, very eclectic, very, very worldly group of women. And they didn't appreciate that. And I think just was tone deaf in the timing. And it's like, why? This is the first game back from COVID. Is that really the tweet that needs to be sent out? So the team the entire team, every single one of them quit the team, walked away from money, walked away from resources. Their contracts obviously were null. They started their own team called This Is Us, kind of like that's not who we are. And they started a team called This Is Us. And their jerseys now say empowerment, unity, and awareness. And they said, yeah, cool. Like, we don't know what's going to happen, but we're not playing here. Like, we don't know if we're going to play, but it's worth it to our integrity and what we stand for. And I just think, like, usually what happens is an insensitive tweet goes out, and then, whatever, a couple of days later, somebody apologizes for it. They say, I'm so sorry I said that, I didn't mean it, which is obviously not true. And then everyone goes about their business. But this group of women, I just think, is incredible that they risked all of what they had going for them playing and walked away from it, and then started a GoFundMe to raise funds to hopefully play. Unfortunately, their season was canceled because of COVID, but they're still banded together. They're still staying as a team and trying to use what they've done to kind of encourage other people to act in the same manner and just act with integrity. And they've got some projects going. I'm not involved with them by any means. I just am a huge supporter of anyone who risks it, anyone who stands up for something that they believe in. And so that, I mean, Kat and I connected when I was at Driveline Baseball, because I was trying to help start up some softball stuff there, and didn't really get off the ground, and COVID hit. And yeah, so Kat and I connected then, and just kind of kindred spirits of sorts, because she's definitely an athlete who wants to use her platform to do good in the world, who wants to use her platform to encourage other young women to play at a high level, coach at a high level. She's just a really dynamic person, and we really hit it off. So I just am supporting them in any way that I can, and being a voice, hopefully, and spreading the word. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of how that went down.
That's awesome. And I've always had a huge amount of respect for athletes who've used their platform to do bigger. And like we talked about earlier, I mean, it is bigger than a game. And, obviously someone who came from a nonprofit background, giving back and volunteerism is always something that's near and dear to my heart. So, but yet you still kind of have those detractors out there who are like, just play your game. There's no room for politics in sports. There's this or that or the other thing. Where I think the exact opposite. If you have a platform, why are you using it for good? So, what do you say to those detractors?
Yeah, just the thing is if you are an athlete at a high level, you're a role model whether you like it or not. The problem is that most athletes say, I don't want that responsibility. But it's like, too bad, you got it. The problem is that no one's really preparing them for that. No one encourages them. No one says, hey, when you get to the major league team, we expect you to be involved in the community. We expect you to do these things. And there is some of that there, but it's not really a high priority. But if you have a giant following, and not just Instagram or whatever, but also, Instagram, you have a big voice, you better be aware that people are watching you. And that's something that's at the forefront of my mind. I'm not even, it's not like I'm famous or anything. It's just like, I know that when I show up to like a baseball or a softball event, likely people are going to know who I am. So I make sure that my actions align with how I want to be perceived, and and my words align with that. And it's, it's not always easy, because it's like, you don't always want to be like on call to be somebody's role model, because sometimes you're going through something. It's like, gosh, sometimes I got to take care of myself. I'm going through something, or I'm trying to, make a big career move or whatever. But at the same time, it's like, too bad, you shouldn't have signed up for it. When I signed the contract for the New York Yankees, I signed up for 2 jobs. And if I didn't want to sign up for both of them, a hitting coach and a role model, then I shouldn't have signed the paper. So for me to say that I can't do podcasts, or I can't whatever be visible, or I can't show up, that's selfish, honestly, because you're not taking into account what it means to the community, to the team, to young women. You're not aware of what it means, which means you shouldn't have signed up for that job anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. I mean, I know with our organization, we had teams from 10 and under on up to 18 and under. And I would always tell our older players, even as 18-year-old kids, I'm like, look, whether you want to or not, those 10-year-olds look up to you, So if we go out on a trip and you guys want to go do something stupid at the hotel, those 10-year-olds are going to look at that and think that's the way we should all behave. And I think if you stress that to young people, it's easier for them to understand that. So, obviously you talked a lot about your mom and dad earlier, but was there anything specific as you were growing up that, they instilled in you that made this part of your life important to be a role model?
I mean, I was always like, people ask me like, oh, did you ever think that this? And I'm like, yeah, I did. I don't know. I couldn't have told you that I was going to be a hitting coach in the Yankees organization, but I was always the leader. Like I was always stepping out front, speaking my mind, captain of the team, those kinds of things. And even so funny, I was just home to I got an award from my high school and I spoke, and there was a guy there that I actually went to grade school with who now is a professor at my high school that I went to. We both went to high school together too. He said, the one thing I remember about you from grade school? And I was like, oh God. I was like, I don't know what, this could be anything. And I tell this story too, but I was like, thank God somebody's here to witness it. He said, yeah, we sat next to each other in computer class in fourth grade, and we were doing the assignment about what you wanted to be when you grow up. And you said that you wanted to be the first female kicker in the NFL. And I was like, oh my God, like, I can't remember you remember this. And he was like, I'll remember it forever because I remember thinking you were crazy. And now here we are, literally 22 years later, 23 years later, and you're the first female in a couple of different positions in a men's professional sport. And he was like, man, I just tell people I knew it when I was 10, and so I don't know, my parents didn't necessarily, they didn't say you need to be a role model. They just created a leader. They created a person who wasn't afraid to speak up. They created a person who could be aggressive and go after things. And when I was 16, I flew to Texas to go to the Texas softball camp. There were no other girls from there. Honestly, there was not a lot of girls from even outside of Texas that went to that camp. And I flew myself down there, and my parents just let me. And I think back and I'm just like, how did they let me do these things? But they just really raised us. They didn't tell us you have to be the leader, but they raised us to have leadership qualities. And that's my sisters and myself self-select into those positions just because we have those qualities. So they didn't necessarily say I had to be the leader, but they raised us to have integrity, to work hard, to be the first one to go and not to wait to have to follow other people doing the right thing, but just to do it. So I think it's just inherent that that's what I've become, I guess.
That's awesome. So we're just about out of time. And before we get to our final question, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you just want to throw out there for our listeners?
Not really. Those are some really good, I don't get asked a lot. Those were questions I haven't answered before. So that's wonderful.
Great. I guess I'm doing my job then. I'm glad to hear that. So as I told you, the subtitle to this podcast is Many Little People, Many Little Places, and it comes from a song by a guy by the name of Michael Franti. And the opening lyrics are, when many little people in many little places do many little things, and the whole world changes. And like I said, you started to answer it, and then they're like, well, I'll wait to the end. But, what are one of the things that you feel you're doing today to make the world a better place?
I don't know. My whole life is surrounding that. It's like I think about it every day. So for me right now, and that means something different at every time in our lives, means something different. Like I'm donating $5 a day of my own money. I don't expect everyone to do that. There's definitely a time not too long ago when I was in grad school that I couldn't have done that, or I couldn't eat, but I think we all can do something. And so for me right now, I started this GoFundMe. I'm doing as many, I think I've probably done 100 podcasts or interviews or, whatever in the past 3 months here, so that I can continue to feed that GoFundMe and trying to donate, and also just like being available for the 15-year-old that wants to talk to me, just to talk, just like, that's what I can do. That's my superpower right now, because I know I just hope that someday that 15-year-old that had that conversation with me is going to remember that I was there, and she's going to remember something I said, and it's going to spark an idea in her head. It's going to give her confidence. And just, that's what right now, that's what I want to do. I have grander ideas that I'd like to accomplish in the future. And and getting more women involved in sport and starting schools in the Dominican Republic for women surrounding sports so that we can move that country along, because that's a country I've spent a lot of time in, and baseball is deeply intertwined there. So, I mean, there's plenty of things that I want to do on a grander scale, but I think that I love this. I love the many little people, many little play. I love that, because it's like people think, I think a lot of times they think the problem is so big they can't do anything, but it's like, just do a little thing. You know, realistically, the GoFundMe that I started has $6,000. That's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but it's more than zero, and it's more than I would be able to give myself. So that's it. That's all. That's what I can do. You know, and I could be doing more, I guess, but it's like that's what I can do with the time and the resources that I have right now, and I'd like to do more in the future. And it's just, everybody's duty is just to do what you can with what you have, and don't let the problem be so big that you do nothing. Just do something. You know, 1 hour a month of volunteering, or $10 to a GoFundMe. People think, oh, I can only give $5. That's $5, and if everyone gave $5, it'd be a lot of money. So I think I love that. I love the subtitle of your podcast, because it says it so perfectly, is that everyone has a special gift to give. I believe everyone has a calling that most people either don't acknowledge that they have a calling, or they acknowledge it and they don't act on it. So I just try to do every day. I try to empower people. I try to be available for people that want to talk to me, make the extra time even when I don't want to do it. And hopefully there's some good coming out of that. And so I think it's really, truly in the forefront of my mind every single day.
That's awesome. I love that answer, and I love the fact that it really is intentional for you. So I'll, when we post this on my website, I will put links to your GoFundMe page. I'll put links to your website. I encourage my other podcasting friends who are out there to reach out to Rachel. She's very, very accessible. This is a very easy process for me to get this scheduled, and I think it's a story that needs to be told. You know, we did 100 podcasts in a couple months. I hope that, there's 100 plus more in the future for you, because I think this is a story that absolutely needs to be told. I appreciate you taking the time. And, for everybody out there listening, be sure to check out my other blogs and former podcasts at my website at danclouser.com. Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time out, and just keep doing what you're doing. As my friend Michelle Deloso says, keep on keeping on. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much.